Kash Patel, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, a White House spokesperson has pushed back, saying, quote, House Republicans have been investigating the president for 9 months and they've turned up no evidence of wrongdoing. To begin, why do you think Leader McCarthy is launching this inquiry now?
Well, that's a slightly complicated answer from my perspective. So having been both a public defender and a public federal prosecutor, I don't think in the 1,000+ criminal cases I ever handled that a criminal that I either defended or prosecuted basically said, here, I did it, here's my crime, and here's all the evidence. What criminal masterminds do is they cover up the crime, and usually how they get caught is not the underlying crime itself, but the cover-up. So when Democrats say that there's no evidence, I have to point them to the $20 million of funding from the CCP cutout affiliates in the Ukraine, from the meeting at Cafe Milano that Vice President Joe Biden had with the mayor of Moscow's wife a week after she sent his kid $3 million. This is evidence of money moving for business-related activities. And now we know Joe Biden was, as vice president, on the phone with Hunter's business associates working these deals. So that is a tremendous amount of evidence. And I think Speaker McCarthy, it ties into his decision-making. He had to move forward with the mountain of evidence to actually get the documentation from FBI and DOJ that Wray and Garland have stonewalled from these committees.
And now there's also been pushback even on the conservative side. Actually, with the National Review, there was a op-ed calling this impeachment inquiry just but unwise. What's your take on this?
Look, I think from a political standpoint, I understand why they want to impeach Biden. I have always said, and I still say this, that the impeachment of Wray and Garland would be of more value to the American people because they have created this two-tier system of justice. They have allowed for Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea deal. They have allowed for the cover-up and the corruption, and it's not the first instance. Not to mention our top two law enforcement officers, Wray and Garland, have come into Congress under oath and lied. And they have failed to turn over documents that have been lawfully subpoenaed by members of Congress and should be held in contempt of Congress. And so I think those two would be a better result for the American public so we can see the documents, force their testimony, and understand why they've lied and covered up for all these years. Joe, I think a lot of the documentation will lead to Joe Biden. And so the impeachment, I think, of him is more political than it is substantive in some sense. But so I can somehow understand why others out there are saying things like that. My preference would have been Wray and Garland first.
And Kash, speaking of the American public, if we look at history here, there have been 3 impeachments of U.S. president. We had Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and of course Trump. None were convicted. What is the impact on the American public with these impeachments?
Well, one, it's a huge expense, and it's a taxpayer-funded investigation, as is any activity by the United States government. 2, the world's eyes will be on this impeachment. So my advice to anyone who takes up this impeachment mantle seriously is utilize it not to advance a political headline, but to garner the information that the American public needs and the world needs to adjudicate this matter. Because this matter is not going to be resolved in the Senate. We know it's not going to result in a conviction. The votes aren't there. Even if you find this quote-unquote smoking gun in the videotape of the fraud and criminality. What the American public needs to see is why the FBI and DOJ have covered up, redacted their corruption in this case, why they sideline IRS investigators after 5 years, why they offered Hunter Biden a deal that is unlawful under DOJ regulations. These are the types of questions Americans want to know because it doesn't apply to them directly, but what they want to know is, why is our leadership, why is our law enforcement community allowing a two-tier system of justice, and am I next?
I want to zoom in on this potential political fallout, especially after the impeachments of President Trump. Are we just going to be starting to see impeachments when each house or party is in power?
And that's a great point. That was the slide that we talked about when President Trump was impeached not once but twice, and now here it's ironic that you have the other side saying, Chuck Schumer is particularly saying it's a witch hunt, which is an interesting use of the phrase for people who want to launch an investigation. And then you'll have the pundits and naysayers saying, well, it's just a political hatchet job. And that is a detraction for Americans, and it's a detraction for the work of Congress when Congress has outstanding work like funding the government to do. And people have said, why is Congress issuing subpoenas and not enforcing any of them? But if you're a Donald Trump supporter, they're enforced against you and you're sentenced to prison. People are tired of this disparate system of justice. And right now, the DOJ and FBI are leading the charge in creating that alternate system of justice. So they can't possibly investigate themselves. So the frustration is, why isn't Congress restoring our sense of justice to America? And I don't know that they will through this impeachment process. We'll see.
And now, switching gears a little and zooming in on Trump, there's been another attempt this week in Minnesota to remove Trump from the ballot in 2024. That's citing the 14th Amendment, which says anyone who engages or aided in insurrection can't run for office. Could this actually succeed in removing Trump from the ballot?
No. The Constitution and the 14th Amendment are federal law of the United States of America. No state secretary of state can come in and utilize that amendment to bar anyone from running for any office, let alone the presidency of the United States. That's the black letter law. Now, turning to the federal courts and the Supreme Court that interpret things like the 14th Amendment and our constitutional amendments, there is not one single case that interprets that amendment to allow for that activity to occur. To me, this is just a politicization and a continued weaponization of justice, and it's the next iteration of how are we going to get Trump. If it's not the indictments, it's going to be the 14th Amendment. If it's not the 14th Amendment, we tried to use it, remember the 25th Amendment, which didn't apply then, to say he was somehow incapable of doing the job and they wanted to wear a wire against him. That would have also been unlawful. They'll come up with something else. The folks that want to sideline Donald Trump, in my opinion, aren't going to stop. This isn't the last we're going to see of it. But when you have folks like Alan Dershowitz come in and actually tell you what the law is on the 14th Amendment, who's no fan of Donald Trump, I tend to believe those credible folks.
Kash Patel, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Have a great day.